Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages. Bill, finally, there's a big game. Oh, I forgot to introduce you. This is Bill Rabinowitz, ladies and gentlemen.
This is Bill Rabinowitz, ladies and gentlemen. That's Tim May, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I've got, whenever there's a big game in town, as opposed to like the last several we've been covering, where some people weren't paying attention maybe like they should. Suddenly now Ohio State's playing what I expected to be the game of the year in the Big Ten. Of course, Michigan's now kind of like sneaked in there and is looking for equal billing next week. But this is the biggest game of the week for Ohio State for sure this week. And here they are going against Michigan State. Both these teams were expected to be undefeated when they got here. Michigan State kind of fell off the beam a little bit, was walking that tightrope of winning and losing, and finally fell off it at Nebraska. Nonetheless, they can still control their destiny as far as the Big Ten championship is concerned, playing in the Big Ten championship game. And here's Ohio State sitting here 10-0, just fell from its last #1 spot in the coaches' rankings from #1 to #2. They're number two in both major polls, and then #3 in the college football playoff rankings. But that doesn't diminish the fact that this is a huge telling game in the 2015 Big Ten race.
Oh, I get to talk.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, Ohio State, a lot has been made about they're not #1 anymore. First of all, they're not #1 mainly because they haven't played anybody. They haven't played a ranked team. Obviously, that changes this week. Michigan State is 9th in the polls. And Michigan State, Michigan, and then presumably Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. If Ohio State wins those games, I think there's a really good chance they'll be #1 overall. But again, it doesn't matter. They'll certainly be top 4. Yeah. But this is the test. I mean, we've waited for 10 weeks. It seems like it's been just kind of a warm-up act, week after week after week. And now we finally get the main course. And the thing is, whatever issues Ohio State has had, Michigan State's had them worse. They've also had a lot more injuries. Ohio State lost Ed Davis, their star linebacker, before the season started, I think, and even now Connor Cook is potentially injured. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. But
his right shoulder on his throwing arm.
Not a good thing for a quarterback, right, Tim?
Correct.
So anyway, you'd like to see Michigan State undefeated. You'd like to see them at full health, but this is still going to be a very imposing team coming into Columbus.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think this Ohio State defense is peaking right now. I mean, by peaking, I mean it's climbing the hill, let's put it that way, and they're the highest point they've been so far this season with Joey Bosa involved and Von Bell and Raekwon McMillan and that whole cast of characters on the defensive side. And then, but offensively, of course, Urban Meyer left no doubt about right after the game on Saturday at Illinois. We were sitting there talking to him. I mean, one of the first things out of his mouth after feeling good about the victory, et cetera, was the pass protection had problems on Saturday. Specifically, Chase Ferris had some challenges on Saturday against Illinois. And now here they are, as Urban Meyer said on Monday at Ohio State when we were talking to him, probably going against the best defensive front they faced all year. That will be the challenge this week, is getting that pass protection shored up.
No question. And Shalik Calhoun is an All-American player. They line him up everywhere. They certainly will, and I have a feeling they're going to line him up against Chase Ferris as often as they can. I think Chase Ferris can be an effective player. He's got the athleticism. He's got the size. As Taylor Decker said, sometimes the issue is confidence, and that's with any position, but especially when you're kind of out on an island like a right tackle can be. So he's got to play well. Now you can do things. You can bring a tight end in to help block. Obviously, Ezekiel Elliott is as good as there is at pass pro. So, but Ohio State obviously would want to be able to block their 4 guys with Ohio State's 5 linemen and get guys out in patterns, because that will open up the defense. And Michigan State does dare you to do that.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this Michigan State team is it's not the offense it was a couple of years ago when they upset Ohio State. I mean, they've struggled at times getting some consistency, even with Connor Cook at quarterback. I mean, they've had some skill guys have to step up. Aaron Burbridge, though, their talented wide receiver, he is the definition of a go-to guy, because he always seems to be the man of choice when they need a play. Defensively, they're like, I think, 46th in the nation in total defense right now, which, doesn't look great on the resume. Yet last week against Maryland, they did a good job against a Maryland team that ran up some yards against Ohio State. So we'll see where that goes. The interesting thing, though, is it's like if you are having trouble in pass pro and you're playing against a team that sinks his teeth into that kind of like thing. Shalik Calhoun is one of the great players in the country. Then that will be the interesting spotlight thing to watch this week.
And the reverse is true for Ohio State's defensive line against Michigan State's offensive line, which has been decimated by injuries. They've had guys in and out. I think
Connor Cook got hit a lot on Saturday.
And if Ohio State with a guy with a sore shoulder can take some shots at him, you have to feel like Connor Cook will be feeling that pressure before he even gets there. And I tell you, Joey Bosa, you almost can't say enough about what he's doing. He's taking on as many as 3 guys and still just dominating. He's as close to an unblockable player as I've seen in a long time. And it's not just him. It's Tyquan Lewis. It's Adolphus Washington. As you said, Raekwon McMillan has really come alive. I mean, come on. Darren Leeds, Joshua Perry, go and Von Bell. I mean, you go through all those guys. But I will say this, they can't miss tackles. I mean, they've had some issues with tackling lately, and Michigan State will make you pay.
Yeah, and then a matchup to watch, for example, is Eli Apple, who's one of the co-defensive players of the week this week for the Ohio State team, along with Joey Bosa at cornerback. He may be going against Burbridge a lot, and/or Gary and Connolly, the other cornerback. I think those are the only 2 guys you didn't name in the defense there, Bill, when you were going through your litany. But no, you're exactly right. I mean, Joey Bosa, I wrote a story in our Game Day Plus section last week where, near the end there, where he starts talking about he wants to be basically unblockable by the time this season is over, and he thinks he's gotten really close to that. By unblockable, I mean, somebody's always going to get up in you, but getting away from those guys, not letting that affect your play too much, that's the difference, and that's where he really excels. And you might want to go back and read that at dispatch.com if you get a chance, because it was a really interesting insight on him, just talking about the fact that he doesn't have that stack of sacks like he had this time a year ago, but he is affecting almost every play.
If I can assure you that NFL scouts watching tape of Joey Bosa have no questions about whether he's having as good a year or better than last year. I mean, there's just no question. A guy that's going to be interesting to watch this week on the Ohio State defense is Gary Connolly, because last year Eli Apple had a bad hamstring, didn't start, didn't practice all week, didn't think he was going to play. Gary Connolly comes in, gets beat on the first long pass, and then gets beat on a swing pass, misses a tackle. And they put Eli Apple in. I think Gary Connolly's probably got a lot to prove. He's a much different player this year. He's a proven player. He played very well against Illinois. There was the one play where they cut it outside, and he just maintained his area. But I'm sure that for Gary Connolly, that memory lingers.
Well, the interesting thing, too, though, is you look back on that, because I've asked Eli Apple about that game a million times since then. It was sort of the moment when Eli Apple became a factor, because when he went into that game, because they were picking on Gary Connolly, when he went into that game, it totally changed Michigan State's offense, because he made a few plays. Next thing you know, they don't really have a secure place to go with the football. And it also helped Gary Connolly understand that just because you're a starter doesn't mean you're quite ready to play, and he has been a changed man since then. I mean, he is playing on an elite level right now, in my opinion, at cornerback. I mean, just, when you get chances, just kind of key or zero in on these guys on occasion and watch them cover. Watch them cover with also a little bit of a nod toward what's going on coming at them in the backfield. Do they have to now break off and go help on run support and things like that? It's quite a clinic on occasion. Not as much of a clinic though as watching Joey Bosa and Tyquan Lewis, and when he gets his chances, Sam Hubbard. I mean, they've got three defensive ends they can throw out there and just get after a quarterback.
I think the defense is playing at the level that Ohio State was at the end of last year. The offense is not. It's just little things. Ezekiel Elliott is as good as he's been. Even he's not putting up 200-yard games, but who does? But I think they have to be able to find kind of that medium range passing. I think they've got to get Braxton Miller involved. He had 2 touches last week for minus yards.
-4, actually.
4 yards. Jalen Marshall is obviously boy, what a terrific punt return. He's so elusive, so smooth, but you got to get him the ball more than a couple times a game. And Michael Thomas, the guy you probably need to target 10 times a game. He's that good. So the ingredients are there on offense, but they haven't put it all together yet. And there's no better time than next week.
Exactly. And the thing is, I keep being asked when I'm on radio shows, you do too, about Ezekiel Elliott in particular. I think he made a statement last week when he needed to. 181 yards rushing. Those 5 carries in a row when they just said they were going to hammer it down Illinois' throat, and they did. That, in my opinion, was a tour de force for both him and the offensive line. This Heisman race, it's never over, baby, at the start of November. The end of December, the end of November is when you want to really be putting some games out there. And if you look back, that's when he really got things rolling. He and the offensive line got things rolling last year. And, of course, the 2 games that didn't count on his resume, but they don't mind, were the Sugar Bowl and then the national championship game when he had, a combined 230, 246. So my quick math says that's 476 yards rushing against Alabama and Oregon with everything on the line. That should be on his 2015 Heisman resume. I don't know if you agree or not.
Have you been talking to Stacy Elliott?
No, I told him that a long time ago. I mean, how do you just throw those games away when you're considering Ezekiel Elliott? Because they didn't count. The Heisman Trophy was awarded a month before that.
I don't know how to answer that, but I will say this: that
how do you?
Well, because that was that was last year. That was last season. Yeah. But
so what? Those were exhibition games.
I think Ezekiel Elliott putting those numbers up to win a national championship was good enough. I don't think you need the Heisman bonus.
They got him in the conversation for this year. I know what you're saying.
It did. Yes, it did. If Ezekiel Elliott goes off this week against Michigan State and then Michigan and then Iowa, he'll be right there. I mean, he'll be right there. Does Iowa count? Iowa counts.
Yeah, Iowa definitely counts. The week before.
Voting was, yeah. He'll put himself in the conversation because Leonard Fournette, who was the odds-on guy a couple weeks ago, got shut down by LSU or by Alabama, and then they lost again last week. So
Arkansas.
What's his candidacy? And then you look at some other guys, and it's there for the taking if Ezekiel Elliott gets hot.
I mean, it's going to be interesting. There are a lot of things to keep an eye on as Ohio State heads into this game. Ezekiel Elliott's got a 15-game streak of 100 yards plus rushing. Ohio State has a streak of 30 straight wins in the Big Ten regular season games. And, of course, Ohio State has the longest winning streak in the country at 23 games. And as Urban Meyer was talking about when he got home on Saturday night and was watching local television, one guy says it'd be, they need to get on a roll now. And he's going, wow, yeah, I guess you're right. We need to get on a roll, But these last two games were always going to be, if they got to this point 10-0, these were always going to be the games. And it's turned out that way. It's really funny how that works, isn't it, Bill?
It is, but this was so predictable. I mean, you looked at the first 10 games and you thought, it is still hard to win 10 in a row. And anyone who said it was a given, I think they were deluding themselves because college football is just too difficult to expect or that it's an automatic win. But nobody should be surprised they're 10-0. Yeah. I mean, you look at who they played, who's going to beat them? Well, now you're at the point where, of course, Michigan State can beat them. Of course, this Michigan team can beat them. And Iowa is still a bit of a mystery, but, hey, they're 10-0 too. So, this is where it gets fun, really.
This is where like talent goes against like talent, and that's what makes these very interesting. And then you find out, well, this one's got a little bit more talent than that one, but turnovers and stupid things like that can totally flip a game. Like I told you, I don't think this Michigan State team is as good as it was last year, or definitely not as good as it was 2 years ago, but great coach up there in Mark D'Antonio, who we both know extremely well, and they do have talent, and they've got a great quarterback. If, in fact, he's close to 100%, Connor Cook will be aiming to win his last game in his home state. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons to tune in on Saturday. We'll be back this time next week to talk about the Ohio State-Michigan State game. It's the results, its ramifications, and then to look forward to, I think they're playing the game the next week. Is that correct, Bill? At Michigan?
Who?
At Michigan,
Ohio
State.
Fine if you say that in the building.
No, you and I can say Michigan, 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 Michigan all we want, Bill. But until then, this is Tim May.
Bill Rabinowitz, thanks for watching.